We talked about the trust issue, and there's some very interesting surveys out there on trust. Gallup did.
She is struggling in that chair, bro.
Across the board in trust in all institutions.
I feel her.
Except law enforcement, which is very interesting. Congress, sorry for my friends there, is the lowest. Media is down there almost as low as Congress. Those that rank the highest were small business and the military. So this low media rank, is that fair, or is that being manufactured as part of a culture war?
Oh, it's fair. I mean, it's entirely fair. I mean, I think that one of the things that we've seen for both good and bad, the fragmentation of media is a result of systemic distrust in the media, and that's existed for a very long time, and that's nothing new. And I think that it's completely fair for people to look at the media. I know there are people on the left who think that the media is too right-wing, right? Obviously, we on the right think that the media is far too left-wing. But I think that sort of distrust in media sources is very often justified. I think that we're requiring more of people than we used to in the past, because once people have realized that there's an inherently political angle to how people cover the news, now we're asking them, if you want a full rounded diet, you actually have to choose it yourself, right? You have to cultivate yourself to watch the Young Turks and then watch my show and decide who you agree with, and where there's sort of a common locus of fact. That's the fact, and everything else is the opinion. That's asking a lot of viewers, where we didn't used to ask very much of viewers at all, right? You just turn on the evening news for Cronkite to say whether it's true or not.
That's too bad. You have to ask viewers to think. Oh no, I gotta think? How do people get through life at all? They don't think. I guess that's the...
I think most Americans waking up to that is a good thing.
Oh no.
The systemic lack of trust in media has some bad downstream effects sometimes, because when there are no gatekeepers, there are no gatekeepers. So I like the fact that there are no gatekeepers, because I think the gatekeepers were very often biased, but without gatekeepers, sometimes bad stuff gets through.
Hi guys, how are we all doing? I want to introduce you to Officer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now we're experiencing people existing in various filter bubbles. So if you are, for instance, consuming most of your news online, if you like a particular brand of programming, if you, let's say, lean more conservative and you're watching mostly conservative news, algorithms offer up more and more conservative news.
Algorithm.
And so when you get if you have preconceived notions and all of a sudden you're hearing or reading something that challenges those preconceived notions, you're going to have a negative reaction to it. And you see that playing out across the board. I'll give you an example. I mean, I have family members who are constantly consuming news online. My mom's a good example, right? She's, you'd be surprised she's my mom, because she's on Facebook. She clicked on a link to, let's say, the Daily Wire, perfect example. Well, Facebook is going to be offering up more Daily Wire type content. And then all of a sudden, when she's watching the Young Turks, she'll be like, well, you know, I read on Facebook, or I read on the Daily Wire, or whatever, that X, Y, and Z happened, and you're wrong, right? That conversation doesn't actually happen that often. But I'm giving you an example.
I was hopeful there for a second.
Oh hell no, I was very unhopeful. Thank God she doesn't. No,
Look,
fuck that.
There are all sorts of issues with the media, right? I mean, the media for the longest time completely ignored the very real frustrations that workers have been feeling in this country. I mean, the Federal Reserve released data indicating that nearly half of Americans can't even afford a $400 emergency. At the same time, you tune into CNN, CNBC, MSNBC. I mean, it doesn't matter, across the board. And they're like, the economy is doing great. You know, we're seeing record growth. And what they're specifically talking about is the stock market. But the stock market is disconnected from the reality that the majority of workers are facing. So I think that type of stuff leads to
stocks,
people feeling, you know, distrustful toward the press. At the same time, they exist in these filter bubbles and have their preconceived notions. It's hard to challenge that. So there's a lot of different things happening at the same time. I don't blame people for not being so trusting of the media. One other thing that I'll note is that the incentives are always in the wrong place. The kind of stories that I want to talk about on the Young Turks, and do talk about on the Young Turks, get no attention. They don't do well in terms of the number of views. I want to talk about international news. I want to talk about what's happening in Brazil. I want to talk about what's happening in Ecuador. It'll get like maybe 40,000 views at most. You know what gets a lot of views? I don't know, Ana Kasparian destroys this person, or here's the latest cat fight. Like, I hate it. It's garbage. It's garbage. Because it leads to people not trusting the press.
That's why I like this format. More educational.
The profits are there.
More
the money is
intelligent, you know.
And I think you see that play out across the board, whether you're talking about cable news or online media.
Yep.
and at the dinner table, we're having an interesting conversation. It's clearly a generational thing. My generation grew up watching Walter Cronkite and Huntley and Brinkley and all these folks. And one of the things that I saw in your bio was that you got interested in this field because of Barbara Walters. So what happens now to the Barbara Walters? I mean, where does news reporting go?
That's a good question. I think that's the best question he's probably had.
Are we simply going to continue to retreat to those mediums that demonstrate that we know everything already? Where's this going to go now?
Right.
Well, let me just note, I loved Barbara Walters on ABC's 2020. So I remember as a kid, like getting super excited
cool.
after TGIF was over because ABC's 2020 would be on. And I was like fascinated by the fact that this woman was getting paid to talk to these incredibly interesting people from around the world. And I was just fascinated by the conversations. That's how I got interested in journalism and the media. Mm-hmm. But
that's cool.
I just feel like the type of conversations that she had, or just news about world events, they don't seem to attract the kind of attention that they used to. And it might be because of an oversaturated market. It might be because conflict tends to sell. Manufactured conflicts tend to sell. Mm-hmm. But I wish we can get back to a place where journalism still really existed, where there was like ethical standards that were, that reporters abided by, anchors abided by. I wish there was a clear distinction between opinion and actual hard news journalism. This is what I talk about with my journalism students whenever I have the time to teach. I always tell them, I'm like, look, there's a difference between what I do, which is analysis, opinion, and what you should be doing as an investigative journalist, for instance. Going out there and actually gathering the news, talking to both sides, not equating both sides and acting as if...
Right, she analyzes the news. They gather, she analyzes what they gather. Exactly. It's like a two-pronged attack, if you will.
You're completely neutral. But making sure that you gather the facts on the ground and report them as they are, it's really hard to find that these days. There's still great journalism taking place. I wouldn't be able to do my analysis or my job without that great journalism taking place. But these are the people who are oftentimes not paid well, ignored, and don't get any of the benefits that someone might in the media if you engage in the conflict nonsense.
Can we go back, Ben, and separate the fact-based from the opinion now, or is it going to be conflated for the foreseeable future?
I mean, I think the truth is that was a relatively modern construct. I mean, if you go back to the foundations of the Republic, the people who were reporting were also doing opinion, and that was true all the way through the beginning of the 20th century. It was really only with Walter Lippmann in the 1920s that you start talking about objective standards in journalism. And there's a difference between an objective standard that you apply to how a story is reported and being an objective reporter, meaning you have no politics at all. And I think, frankly, if you want to reinstall some sort of institutional trust, it would be good for reporters to say, here's who I voted for.
Is there really, I mean, honestly, in the year 2021 of our science, is there really any truly objective, not even journalist, but person? Like, you have to have someone born straight from the womb, completely disconnected from, like, everything in society almost, to not have some kind of leadings one way or another in certain ideas and thoughts, So, I just find that strange. It is kind of weird, though, because it's, you're supposed to have, in theory, people like that in those positions, but you can never ensure anybody is like that in society nowadays. Everyone's like, I guess you'd call, tainted by some sort of something, preconceived notion, or what you could call it, earlier in their life at some point. It happens. Just to be a part of society, that is going to happen. That it's almost like indoctrination by association, and it's just an interesting thought.
And then here are also the facts that I am reporting on, because otherwise it ends up being a gotcha, right? I see how you're reporting that. I see what you're doing. I know what you really think about this story. So that's a major issue. I think the other big issue, obviously, I mentioned gatekeepers before. I'm very wary of the reinstallation of institutional gatekeepers, because if you want to talk about market incentives, the big players have all the incentives to ensure that they are the ones who maintain their access to the gate. And this is one of my great fears with some sites that like Facebook, is that
Simp for Cinema, how's it going?
Trusted news sources, and those all coincidentally are legacy media sources, means that everybody who's not a legacy media source, somebody who started up a company in the last 10 years, we opened our doors in 2015.
Just dissecting some good footage here. Hope you're enjoying it.
We're not legacy media. And so we don't have that legacy. So now you're shutting out all the players who are actually entering the market.
So you actually mentioned, again,
Appreciate you joining.
Shift because you got my attention earlier. You're both born and raised in California. You left, you stayed, but we had an interesting conversation at the dinner table that maybe your perspectives on California aren't all that different. Ben, I know you said you were afraid your kids were going to have a difficult time because of their political views. So are you sad that you left California? Or tell us?
I have not thought for one day about that decision. That was one of the best decisions that I have ever made for my family.
What? That was like a softball? What the hell was that?
Basically,
because
of my Orthodox Jewish faith.
Do you feel bad about leaving California, Ben? Lord and Savior?
Like, what really was that? Like, that was the softest, like, that was like a dig at California in general for no fucking actual reason.
That means that I had to move to a place that had some significant Jewish resources, and so I was looking for
significant Jewish resources?
Was
what?
In that state, preferably with 0% state income tax, and that narrowed it down.
Yeah, there it is. So we can stay rich.
And so Florida is wonderful, but I mean, it wasn't just that. It was really a lifestyle thing.
Crazy.
My wife for years was saying, yeah, we're paying higher taxes, but you make a lot of money, so that's fine. But the problem is you don't get any of the public services back in California. So in our area, which is a fairly decent suburb, you had just an inundation of homelessness in the area. Like, my kids could not walk around the neighborhood. We'd open up our front gate, there'd be a person shooting heroin in their foot literally in front of our house, or a person.
What? These are all just anecdotes. These are all just stories. Like, what? I could say that too. I went outside and a guy was fucking doing blow.
We had,
the fuck?
There was a homeless person who smashed the front plate glass window of our establishment. When we left and we moved our main business to Nashville, then my family and the core of the business.
Are you sure it wasn't like
when we left? We thought
hated your ass?
Probably half the people working for us. Instead, I think over 90% of the people were like, "You're going, get us out of here." Everybody wanted out. There's a reason people are leaving California.
Well, Ana,
what?
California, like Pennsylvania.
You understand what he just did there? He's like, well, one time I went outside and some guy was shooting heroin in his foot, so California is terrible for everybody. If that story is even true, who gives a fuck? It's like your anecdote, and it's like one person in all of California. But B, I don't even fucking think that story is even true in itself. Like, who in the fuck? Like, he lived in a nicer area of the city and stuff. You know he did. So, like, there's no goddamn way to just gonna allow bums to walk up and down the nice areas of the city. Those people are pushed off to the poor people areas, to go congregate around there. They don't, what the fuck? Like, the rich people get what they want in no matter what area. So what he's saying is completely null and void in either aspect of it being true or not, because it's completely just based upon, this one time a guy did this. Like, what the fuck? So everyone's leaving California because a guy shot heroin in front of their fucking house? Oversimplification of an argument, you know what I mean? The gross oversimplification.
Lost another congressional seat, so their population is not growing, certainly not at the same rate as.
But what do you think? What do you guys think?
Et cetera. So share some of your concerns, because you talked a little bit about it before.
Sure. So California is poorly governed right now. I was pretty blunt and transparent about the fact that I signed the petition to recall Gavin Newsom. So
I signed it too. We were on exactly the same page.
Right. Now, unfortunately, the individuals running against him were worse than he was.
Yeah. Yes, they were. That crazy ass dude.
When the ballot showed up to in my mailbox, I ended up voting against the recall. But I was hoping that there would be a better candidate to challenge him. I didn't like any of the candidates. Now, the reason why I've decided to stay in California is because I love the state. I know what the state is capable of, and I would much rather stay and fight to make the state better in any capacity that I have. But with that said,
right.
The issues in California are endless. You have corruption.
She'd help that guy shoot heroin to a rehab center.
Raided by the FBI because of the pay-for-play scheme that he was engaged in. You have real estate developers running amok. You have this effort to build public housing to alleviate some of the homelessness, but at the same time, you have the lawmakers in the state giving these sweetheart deals to developers who are very clearly inflating their prices and taking forever to build said public housing. So there's all sorts of mismanagement. I disagree with the way that they're handling the homelessness issue as well, although I think my solutions might be a little different. I think that this idea of being incredibly laxed with camping has been pretty disastrous and has attracted homelessness isn't just a California issue. It's an issue throughout the country.
Right, exactly.
But when other states are pretty strict against encampments and California is very lax, what do you think that's going to do? It's going to attract homelessness in the state as well. I want to provide housing for everyone. I consider it a human right. But I think the way that the state is doing it through a public-private partnership has not worked out at all.
Thank you. So let's move on to another public policy issue, one that's being debated in Washington right now. Tax the rich is a very popular sentiment. It's also now a fashion statement, I guess, which we've all seen. So when President Biden looks into the microphone and says, "Pay your fair share," what does that mean?
It means that if you're one of the 55 corporations that literally paid absolutely nothing in federal income taxes,
Get 'em, girl.
in 2020, and in fact received $3.5 billion in tax refunds or rebates, or tax refunds.
Get 'em.
Maybe you should.
It's like how
pay your
high?
fair share. But here's the thing: if the tax code is written in a way where corporations can legally take advantage of loopholes and incredibly low effective corporate tax rates, they're gonna do it, right? So it's one thing to say pay your fair share. It's another thing to actually write a tax code that is a little more equitable and ensures that everyone is in fact paying their fair share.
Ben, what's pay
Yep.
your fair share mean?
Yep.
I mean, the obvious answer would be a flat tax, but
Obvious answer would be a flat tax. Well, I was going to say, that's why I paused it. I was going to say his answer is going to be dog shit, but it's already been dog shit. I don't even have to say much more already.
the longer answer is that the United States has one of the most progressive income tax systems on planet Earth. Most of the systems in, for example, Northern Europe are far less progressive. The top tax rate kicks in a lot lower on the income scale because you have to pay for the large-scale social services. The people who are at the top of the income bracket,
Okay.
the top quintile, essentially pays all net taxes in the United States. Not some, not most, all. And the reason for that is because there are tax transfers, and the transfer of payments that are inherent in public services do not accrue to the people at the top of the tax bracket. They accrue to everybody else who's receiving that sort of funding. When we talk about higher taxes on corporations, we do not have one of the world's lowest corporate tax rates. We are somewhere in the middle. Look at the OECD countries. We're certainly not the lowest on the totem pole in terms of our corporate tax rate.
No, it should be higher. Fuck corporations, bro.
It's friendlier to do business in places like Denmark or Sweden in many cases than it is to do business.
We should be able, as Americans, should be able in our system to be able to differentiate from big business, big corporations from mom and pop stores. Like that should not be a fucking talking point for Ben Shapiro to even be able to spew out. It's fucking yes. It's he's fucking completely wrong, and utilizing that as an argument is disgusting because it's literally slaps in the face everything that it's a pretty much. It's counterpointing everything he said prior, and it's, oh my God.
In the United States.
Tax rate's pretty high in Denmark and Sweden.
That's what I'm saying.
The personal income tax rate is very high in Denmark and Sweden. The corporate tax rate is...
And think about it. A flat rate tax would only benefit like if you tax everything exactly the same, small business is going to get hit just as hard as big business. So you would assume that the flat tax rate's still going to hurt the little business more because it's the same across the entire board. So the less you make, the less you produce or whatever, the more it's going to hurt you, which is going to be small business, the smaller end of the fucking totem pole. It's bullshit. But people like Walmart and all of them will be paying that nice fucking flat rate. You know what I mean? Because they can, who's going to set the flat rate? Who's going to set the flat rate? That flat rate's going to fuck somebody. That's what I'm saying. Like they even argue that a flat rate across the entire board of any economic spectrum is ignorant.
Basically near or on par with that of the United States. If we were to raise our corporate tax rate the way that President Biden is talking about, we'd actually have a higher corporate tax rate than China currently does. The notion that corporations ought to be paying tax at all, in my view, is mistaken, given the fact that the income is immediately either reinvested in the company or passed on to people who immediately pay all of that tax. By the time you actually receive your income in this country, the income's been taxed about 7 different ways. Right? You're getting taxed through the corporation, then it's passed on to you as salary, which is taxed. If you invest in the stock market and then you sell your stock,
No one's investing in stock market.
When you die, the government taxes.
No one can afford to invest in the stock market unless they're already rich or wealthy or able to afford to gamble of the stock market.
That as well. So how many times can
The
you
fuck
tax
out of
a
here,
dollar
Ben.
before people begin to
Ben.
invest?
And they clap. Oh my God. Perfect time for an ad. They clapped.
Hey there, you getting some gas?
Oh, fuck these ads.
Well, no gas, no squeegee. No gas, no squeegee.
They fucking I still can't believe that. They fucking clapped for that. Like, yeah, big money, big money. Everyone in that fucking crowd's making 6 fucking figures. Not really, but everyone in that crowd's doing obscenely better than most people I've ever seen in life. And most of them from that big chunk were born into people who have already fucking like, you know, oh, their family's business, or they fucking, you know, they knew somebody. It's always about connections or how you're born. Damn the womb lottery, you know, because I must not have won that. Like, it's so fucking dumb. Like, oh yeah, big business. Oh yeah, they spend all this money. Like, all this money they already had. They already had the capital to succeed in the American system. You motherfucker. God, Ben Shapiro.
I'd like to respond to that, though.
And she's like, hell no, dude. Hell no. Let's hear it, girl.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Woo!
To argue that the corporate tax
I might need a
rates
dab
in
after
the United
that.
States are too high, or that, you know, I mean, first off, let me just touch on the comparison you gave regarding progressive taxes in European countries versus the United States. I mean, yes, the taxes might be higher in those European countries, but what do people living in those countries get in return?
Right.
They get
Right.
childcare. I mean, listen, the average American family, 2-income household, spends a whopping 22% of their household income on childcare alone, right? So when you're talking about European countries that offer quality childcare, that, by the way, that opens up the opportunity for people to go to work, something that we should maybe think about as we're dealing with this
Right.
labor shortage.
Right.
60,000 women.
It's supposed to be fueling the
left job
workforce.
in April alone. Not because they want to, but because they can't afford childcare. Everything in this country is privatized. Everything has a for-profit model. And there's consequences that come along with that, including for the business community that might want, you know, a more robust social safety net program, or social safety net to ensure that people feel comfortable enough to go to work. But we don't have that here. So yes, people might pay more in taxes, including those lower on the income scale, but what they get in return is far greater than what people in this country have been getting.
Right.
The States has spent, since the beginning of the war on poverty, some $22 trillion in the war on poverty. We spend an awful lot on social services in this country on a per capita level. In fact, it is very much on par with what the European countries spend. It's just not spent particularly well. When it comes to child care, a very young Elizabeth Warren, before she became Senator Elizabeth Warren, specifically wrote about universal child care, and she said that it actually was contributing to what she called the 2-income trap in a book that she wrote in the early 2000s. And what she talked about is the fact that there are a lot of women who, for example, may not want to work, and what you're actually doing is incentivizing people to have to go to work because we're now providing child care, as opposed to providing a competitive advantage to, for example, families where one parent is working. I agree with you, by the way, that, you know, childcare is a very difficult issue. I also agree that this is why we used to have, for example, family.
I'm sure that was a gross summarization of some bullshit that he made up there about that book.
There are many businesses that do provide for some form of childcare. We certainly have many businesses that provide for some form of maternity or paternity leave. The European countries, which obviously have been used as a model by a lot of folks on the left, between 1970 and 1993, they experienced exorbitantly low.
As a person who's worked with a lot of people who have kids, obviously, I don't, but a lot of people who have, childcare is a big fucking issue. Even when they're at work, they're worried about fucking getting their kids picked up, or they're worried about this, or worried about that. They wouldn't have to worry about those things if there was just a base fucking guideline system or something in place to help them, you know, which is hopefully about to go through the Congress, I hope.
Rates of growth. And the reason for that was because they radically overburdened.
They need it. Families need it. I don't have kids. You know what I mean? Like, I know, I can recognize.
A lot of those back. And
why would it create immigration problems?
It created immigration problems because a lot of people were coming specifically for the benefits.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, yes, that would be to my point, which is it creates more problems very often than it's
I mean,
what?
I mean, Sure, I guess that's a.
Yes, if I put a free donut sign in my shop, people will come for the.
No, but if you have a robust, if you have a society.
Oh my God, this
that
Chamber of
actually
Commerce
takes
is
care
mentally
of its
retarded.
workers, right? If you have a society that makes your life a lot easier, people are going to want it.
Why did they clap to that fucking donut thing? What a fucking stupid line. Doesn't even apply. Doesn't even apply.
It's part of the reason why, people wanted to come here. People are going to want to live in countries that have both economic opportunity, but also social safety net programs that.
He's talking
again,
over. Yeah, he's like, okay, nope, stop.
We talk about freedom. If you look at the World Freedom Index, okay, we like to think of the United States as the freest country. We're not the freest country. You look at that list, we're like pretty low down compared to a lot of these Nordic countries. Denmark is top of that list. So look, Denmark has a mixed economy. When we have these debates about, socialism versus capitalism, I think that those debates are a little ridiculous because every country is not every country, but most countries are mixed economies.
Right, the United States.
Right?
And it also shuts down intellectual debate.
The issue with the United States is there used to be a time when public universities were free, right? You didn't have to dig yourself into a massive hole to get an education. There was a time in this country where there was universal child care. That was cut down to the point where it's like no longer in existence unless you're desperate and have like no money and need to take advantage of some programs that are available in some states. But my point is, like, we have an issue here where on one hand, we're experiencing a labor shortage. We want people to go back to work. On the other hand, people literally can't afford the childcare necessary in order to put their kids in a daycare, put their kids in childcare, and be able to go to work without their entire paycheck.
The Biden bill removes many work requirements for many of the payments that are being made to people, and it's incentivizing people not to go back to work, which is why we have 10 million open jobs in the United States.
That's not true at all, no.
That is not what that bill does. In fact, that's not what that.
Let me
Are you
move
talking
on.
about the $3.5 trillion reconciliation
I'm talking about the
bill?
$3.5 trillion bill.
The $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill offers universal pre-K, which opens up the opportunity for mothers to go to work if they want to go to work. The $3.5 trillion bill, by the way, has all sorts of subsidies for corporations, which I don't really understand why the business community isn't salivating over that.
Right.
Just going full force with public programs, which I think would be the right way to go. It's offering all sorts of subsidies in these, public-private partnerships. Now, the physical infrastructure bill has a lot more corporate giveaways, which is why the business community absolutely loves it. Offers the chance to privatize public infrastructure, which is why the business community absolutely loves it. But at the end of the day, if we don't create a society,
their bias is starting to show anyway,
can actually have families and go to work, then we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
So to go back to your immigration point, you made a mention a moment ago of people immigrating to the country for the benefits. That's just abjectly untrue. The fact is that the United States' great immigration growth throughout the beginning of the Republic, all the way up through about 1930, was entirely driven by people who were leaving places that in many cases had broader benefits, places like Germany, to come to the United States where there was no social safety net. The fact is that the vast majority of people who used to leave and come to the United States were coming specifically to build a life knowing that they really didn't have a lot of social safety net. Now, that's not an argument that there shouldn't be some state and local possibility.
It's also a way different time period.
The notion that the way that you build a successful country that is a world power and is capable of not only making sure that its citizens are taken care of, but essentially making sure that the entire Western world is taken care of, which we did throughout the Cold War. The idea that you do that simply by raising the number of social security.
Man, this dude's voice has increased to 1 point. I haven't altered the speed at all. His talking at like 1.5 times speed, dude. He's on like he's on speed.
Payments that you're making to people, or
Whatever.
that sort of economy is just not borne out by
Okay, we've had a real far-ranging conversation.
Yes.
Ben, let me ask you another question.